The studio lights dimmed, casting a sharp spotlight on the polished debate stage. The tension in the room was electric, a charged atmosphere thick with anticipation. Tonight wasn't just another political debate, it was a showdown, a symbolic battle between two visions of America. On one side stood Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, young, sharp, and fiercely loyal to President Trump. Opposite her was Senator Adam Schiff, a veteran Democrat from California, seasoned and polished but facing growing frustration. From the crowd, Sarah Mitchell, the host, smiled professionally, sensing the brewing storm. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we have a spirited debate on the state of America, the media's role, and the future direction of our country. Let's begin. Karoline Leavitt stepped forward, her confident smile carrying the poise of someone who had spent years mastering the art of persuasion. She smiled as if the question posed by Mitchell was a gift she'd been waiting for. "Oh, Miss Mitchell," Leavitt began, her voice warm but edged with sharp intent. "You've hit on a very interesting point." She paused, scanning the audience, as if sharing a secret with a close friend about to drop a bombshell. The media and the Democrats, they're the perfect duo at twisting the truth. And tonight, I'm here to show everyone exactly why. The crowd stirred, curious and eager to hear more. Leavitt took a step closer to the audience, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of confidence and challenge. Let's start with the media. The big newspapers, the major news channels, they don't report facts anymore. They script stories, tailor every headline to fit their narrative. Every day I see distorted headlines about President Trump. Tariffs cause chaos. Trump divides America. But where's the truth in any of that? She reached into her notes and pulled out a paper, holding it up for all to see. Read an article in a major newspaper claiming President Trump's tariffs raised food prices by 20%. Completely false. Data from the Department of Commerce shows food inflation dropped by 3% since Trump took office. She let the statement hang in the air, letting the numbers speak for themselves. Leavitt's words ignited laughter from the audience, some shouting, "That's right, Karoline. Tell the truth." Her gaze shifted sharply to Senator Schiff, who was seated to the side, scribbling notes with a furrowed brow. "Senator Schiff, you and your colleagues love to lean on these media stories to attack President Trump. But Americans aren't stupid. They go on social media, they listen to workers, farmers, families, real people who are benefiting from Trump's policies. Just last week, I read a post on X from a truck driver in Nebraska who said, "Thanks to Trump, I've got more jobs." Do you ever hear stories like that, or do you only trust what's printed in fancy New York offices? Schiff looked up. Briefly, his face tightening as if stung. He scribbled faster, clearly under pressure. The Trump-supporting audience clapped wildly, the applause echoing through the studio. Meanwhile, murmurs of unease spread among the Democrats in the crowd. Leavitt wasn't finished. Her tone sharpened, her sarcasm cutting through the air like a knife. "Now let's talk about the Democrats. Under President Biden, they've left us a mess. Runaway inflation, gas prices doubled, and a border that's become an unguarded marketplace." She glanced toward the cameras, then back at the audience. "I recently met a small business owner in Florida who told me Biden's inflation nearly bankrupted her. But when Trump stepped in and cut taxes for small businesses, she started expanding her store. That's the difference between promises and action." The audience erupted again, one person waving a bright Trump 2024 sign high above their head. The studio's fervor soared. Leavitt continued, her voice steady but filled with passion. "So what do the Democrats do while Americans struggle? They push out-of-touch ideas, forcing gender education on kindergartners, letting men compete in women's sports." She paused for effect, then added, "I spoke to a basketball coach in Texas who's worried his daughter will lose her chance at a championship because of these policies." The crowd's reaction was fierce, the cheers drowning out any attempts by Schiff to interject. Leavitt's smile widened. Americans see all this, and they're fed up. They want leaders who listen, not those who recite speeches from Washington, D.C. As the applause crashed through the room like a tidal wave, Schiff finally tried to speak. "Miss Leavitt, you're distorting the truth," he said, voice steady but strained. "No, Senator." Leavitt cut in, her voice brimming with pride and certainty. "I'm saying what Americans actually think. You should try going out and asking them sometime." Sarah Mitchell sensed the debate tipping heavily in Leavitt's favor. She quickly turned to Schiff, offering him a chance to respond. His voice was quieter now, lacking its earlier force. "The media plays a critical role in checking power," Schiff said. And the Democrats have worked hard to build a fairer America, not as Miss Leavitt describes it. His words fell flat. The audience remained skeptical, their energy clearly on Leavitt's side. Seizing the moment, Leavitt delivered her final blow before the segment ended. Senator, if the media truly checked power, why aren't they questioning Biden's inflation? Why don't they talk about American families struggling under your party's failed policies? Americans chose Trump because he acts, not just talks. Maybe you should learn from him. The audience erupted again, their cheers crashing like waves. Schiff sank back into his chair, his eyes revealing the sting of defeat. The studio was alive with energy as the debate resumed. Karoline Leavitt's words still echoed, her confident barbs hanging heavily in the charged air. Adam Schiff sat momentarily stunned, his hands gripping the podium tightly as he tried to collect his thoughts. The audience's roaring support for Leavitt was a clear sign the tide had shifted, and Schiff knew he had to fight back. Sarah Mitchell, sensing the struggle behind Schiff's eyes, leaned in with a carefully measured voice. Senator Schiff, you've just heard Ms. Leavitt's passionate defense of President Trump and her critique of your party. How do you respond to the argument that many Americans simply want action, jobs, security, and a future for their children, rather than speeches and promises? Schiff took a deep breath, steadying his voice though a hint of weariness crept in. Thank you, Sarah. I understand the frustrations many Americans feel, but it's critical to see beyond slogans and sound bites. He paused, searching the crowd for some nods of approval. President Trump's policies, while often touted as successes, have caused deep division in our country. His tariffs, for example, have hurt farmers and manufacturers who rely on global trade. Schiff glanced at his notes. The idea that inflation dropped simply because of his tariffs ignores the complexities of the global economy. We must look at the broader picture. A murmur rippled through the audience, a mix of doubt and skepticism from Trump supporters and guarded approval from Democrats. Schiff pressed on, voice rising with more conviction. Furthermore, on immigration, policies that separate families and restrict legal pathways undermine America's values. And on education, this administration's refusal to address inequities and its promotion of controversial reforms threatens to harm our children's future. Leavitt watched quietly, arms folded, her expression unchanging. When Schiff finished, she smiled, a slow, knowing smile, and stepped forward, ready to strike again. Senator, she began, her tone almost gentle, yet unmistakably sharp. You say you want to see beyond slogans, but what Americans want is leaders who actually deliver results, not excuses. She swept her gaze over the studio, connecting with faces in the crowd. I've traveled across this country, from factories in Michigan to farms in Kansas. Farmer in Iowa told me, Trump gave me a chance to compete with imports. That's not a slogan, that's real life. The audience responded instantly, applause rolling through the studio like thunder. Leavitt's words cut through Schiff's abstract arguments with tangible stories from everyday Americans. She turned back to Schiff, her voice firm. You talk about family separation, but what about the security of American families worried about open borders and rising crime? I spoke to a mother in Nevada who said she feels safer because President Trump is protecting the border. This isn't politics to these people. It's their daily reality. Another wave of cheers rose up, punctuated by someone shouting, "That's right, Karoline." Schiff's eyes narrowed. He opened his mouth to speak, but Leavitt pressed on, not giving him a chance. And on education, she said, her tone laced with a mixture of frustration and authority. You say the administration's reforms are harmful, but what about the parents who want their kids to learn reading, writing, and math without political indoctrination? I spoke with a basketball coach in Texas, worried his daughter won't get a fair chance because of these policies allowing biological men to compete in girls' sports. These are the issues Americans care about, not abstract rhetoric. The crowd erupted again, the volume of applause making it nearly impossible to hear anything else. Sarah Mitchell raised her hand, calling for calm. Senator Schiff, your rebuttal? Schiff, looking increasingly strained, wiped sweat from his brow. Miss Leavitt is painting a selective picture. The problems she mentions are real, but they don't justify policies that marginalize vulnerable communities or ignore long-term consequences. Americans deserve leadership that unites, that brings people together, not division fueled by fear. The audience's mood shifted slightly. Some Democrats nodded, some Trump supporters grumbled. The tension was palpable. Leavitt smiled again, stepping closer to Schiff's podium, lowering her voice like a sister correcting a younger sibling. Senator, Americans have seen the division, and guess what? They voted for President Trump anyway. She let the silence linger, then added, "You said Biden would crush him, but here we are, with Trump in the White House, and you're scrambling for excuses. Maybe it's time to update your script." The studio erupted, laughter and cheers filling every corner. Schiff sat back, clearly overwhelmed, fingers tapping the podium as he struggled to regain control. Sarah Mitchell glanced between the two, then tried to regain the rhythm. "Thank you both for your candid and spirited arguments. Let's move." On to another important topic on the role of social media in shaping public opinion. Ms. Leavitt, Senator Schiff, how do you see the impact of platforms like X on political discourse? Leavitt smiled knowingly. Social media is where the real America speaks. People don't wait for the evening news to get their stories anymore. They share their lives, their struggles, and their victories directly. She raised her phone for emphasis. I read a post just last week from a factory worker in Ohio who said Karoline speaks for us. She gets what workers need. That's the power of these platforms. They connect leaders with everyday people, bypassing the filter of biased media. Schiff nodded slowly but looked unconvinced. Social media can be a double-edged sword. While it gives a voice to many, it also spreads misinformation and polarization. We need responsible platforms, not echo chambers. The audience buzzed, some agreeing, others shaking their heads. As the segment ended, the studio's energy was unmistakable. Leavitt's sharp, relatable message was resonating deeply with many viewers. Schiff's careful rhetoric, though experienced, struggled to match the passion and directness Leavitt brought to the stage. The debate was far from over, but one thing was clear: a new generation of political voices had arrived, and they were changing the game. The air in the studio crackled with anticipation as the debate moved deeper into contentious territory. Karoline Leavitt sat poised, her confidence unshaken, while Senator Adam Schiff appeared visibly unsettled, clutching his notes as if they were his last lifeline. Sarah Mitchell, the host, glanced between the two, feeling the mounting pressure. To steer the discussion without derailing the explosive energy in the room, "Senator Schiff," Mitchell began, "you've highlighted concerns about division and misinformation, but Ms. Leavitt insists that Americans feel disconnected from your party's priorities. How do you respond to claims that Democrats are out of touch with everyday Americans, their jobs, their safety, their values?" Schiff inhaled deeply and adjusted his glasses. "It's important to understand that leadership requires more than simple slogans or appealing to fears. Our country faces complex challenges that demand thoughtful, evidence-based solutions." He leaned forward, voice steadier now. "We must address climate change, racial injustice, healthcare reform. These are the issues shaping the future, not the false narratives promoted by political opportunists." There was polite applause from some corners of the audience, but much of the crowd remained quiet, their attention fixed on Leavitt. Leavitt smiled subtly, ready to strike again. "Senator, it's easy to talk about complex issues in abstract terms, but what about the people I've met on the ground?" The factory worker in Ohio, who said he's seen real jobs come back thanks to tariffs. The small business owner in Florida who almost closed her doors but is now expanding after tax cuts. These aren't just slogans, they're stories of hope and resilience. She pointed directly at Schiff. "You say Democrats want to solve climate change and social injustice, but what good are these goals if families can't afford groceries or if crime is rising in their neighborhoods?" The crowd erupted in applause. Several audience members waved signs reading "Jobs, Security, America First," while a few shouted, "Tell it, Karoline." Schiff's expression hardened. "Ignoring science and promoting protectionism won't solve economic problems. It will isolate us globally and hurt American workers in the long run. And when it comes to crime, we need comprehensive reforms that focus on prevention, not just punishment." Leavitt's eyes flashed. "And where are those reforms, Senator? I spoke with a police officer in Texas who said his department is stretched thin because federal policies don't support law enforcement. Communities want safety and they want accountability. But Democrats keep pushing policies that frankly confuse and divide." The tension in the room rose palpably. The audience was split, the energy electric. Sarah Mitchell quickly moved to mediate. Let's turn to another hot-button issue, education. Ms. Leavitt, you mentioned concerns about curriculum and sports policies. Senator Schiff, how do you address these fears from parents? Schiff nodded, appreciating the chance to regain footing. Education should empower every child, regardless of background. We oppose discrimination and support inclusive policies that ensure fairness and opportunity. He glanced around the room. That means respecting the rights of all students, including transgender youth, while working to improve academic standards and access. Leavitt's smile tightened. Senator, I respect the idea of fairness, but fairness doesn't mean letting men compete in women's sports or pushing complex gender theories on kindergarteners. I met a mother in Texas who's worried her daughter won't get the same chance at a championship because of these policies. Parents want schools to focus on teaching, not social experiments. The audience reacted strongly, some shouting support. For Leavitt, others calling out for tolerance and inclusion. Mitchell's voice rose over the noise. Please, let's keep this respectful. Senator Schiff, your final thoughts on education? Schiff's voice softened. We must balance compassion with fairness. The goal is to create safe, supportive environments where all children can thrive. Leavitt cut in, her tone sharper now. Safe and supportive means protecting children from confusion and unfair competition. America's future depends on strong families and communities, not on policies that alienate and divide. The studio lights seemed to brighten as if highlighting Leavitt's rising star. Schiff's calm demeanor was giving way to visible frustration. He scribbled furiously on his notes, clearly searching for a new strategy. Sensing his vulnerability, Leavitt pressed her advantage. Senator, you and your party have spent years talking about progress, but Americans are living in a reality where inflation strains budgets, where crime concerns grow, and where they feel ignored by Washington. That's why they chose President Trump, because he promises action, not just words. The applause was thunderous, drowning out even the occasional shouts of dissent. Sarah Mitchell raised her hand to regain control. Thank you both for your passionate arguments. We're approaching the final segment of tonight's debate. Before we close, I'd like to ask each of you, what is your vision for America's future? Schiff stood, his voice steady but less forceful than before. My vision is an America united by justice, opportunity, and respect for all. A country where leadership is measured not by division, but by empathy and real progress on the issues that matter. Healthcare, climate, education. Leavitt stood confidently. My vision is an America where families have jobs they can depend on, where borders are secure, and where children can grow up safe and free, where leaders deliver results, not empty promises. That's why I stand with President Trump and why millions of Americans continue to believe in his leadership. The studio audience rose to its feet, the roar of cheers nearly overwhelming the closing music. The clash had been fierce, the stakes high, and the message clear. America in 2025 was a country divided but passionately engaged. As the debate ended, Karoline Leavitt's star shone brighter than ever, while Adam Schiff faced the challenge of reconnecting with an electorate that was demanding bold, clear answers. Not just politics as usual. As the studio lights dimmed and the final credits rolled, the energy from the debate lingered like a charged storm that refused to dissipate. Viewers across America had witnessed more than just a scripted political exchange. They saw a symbolic battle between two visions of the country, personified by Karoline Leavitt's sharp, unapologetic defense of President Trump and Senator Adam Schiff's more measured, policy-driven approach. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, social media exploded. Clips of Leavitt's sharpest retorts and confident declarations flooded platforms like X, TikTok, and Instagram. The hashtag #LeavittVSchiff trended nationally, and millions of users debated the debate itself, many praising Leavitt for her directness and connection to real America, while others lamented Schiff's inability to break through her rapid-fire attacks. A political analyst on a popular news podcast summarized the divide succinctly. This debate wasn't just about Trump or Biden or even specific policies. It was about who speaks for America's heartland, the people who feel left behind by Washington's elite versus those who believe change requires nuance and expertise. Leavitt captured the spirit of frustration and pragmatism, while Schiff represented the establishment's struggle to resonate. News outlets quickly capitalized on the event's impact. Conservative media hailed Leavitt as a rising star, dubbing her the voice of the forgotten middle class. Fox News evening broadcast replayed the most explosive moments, with commentators applauding her no-nonsense approach and ability to connect with working Americans. Meanwhile, some liberal-leaning platforms critiqued Schiff's performance, but also emphasized the importance of his message on unity, social justice, and long-term progress. Within political circles, reactions varied. Republican strategists saw an opportunity to push Leavitt as a fresh face to lead future campaigns, banking on her sharp rhetoric and relatable storytelling. A campaign consultant close to the Trump administration commented off the record, "Leavitt understands the power of narrative. She doesn't just defend policies, she tells the stories of people those policies help." That emotional connection is gold in politics. On the Democratic side, concern was palpable. Schiff's advisors scrambled to analyze what went wrong. Some blamed the veteran senator's preparation and delivery, suggesting he relied too heavily on established talking points that sounded stale to an audience craving authenticity and simplicity. Others argued the party itself was out of sync with the shifting priorities of the electorate, particularly in swing states and rural areas, where economic anxiety and cultural concerns were paramount. Behind closed doors, there were calls for renewed focus on grassroots engagement. One senior Democrat admitted, "We need to listen more, not just talk about ideals. People want leaders who get their daily struggles, jobs, safety, education. We have to reconnect and adapt or risk losing more ground." Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's social media presence surged exponentially. Fans praised her for being relatable and unafraid to challenge entrenched power. Comments flooded her official accounts. "You speak for the real America." Finally, someone who understands us. More politicians should be like you, not like Schiff. Her tone remained composed but assertive, sharing videos of factory visits, town halls, and personal stories that underscored her message. However, not all reactions were positive. Critics accused Leavitt of oversimplifying complex issues, dismissing legitimate concerns about the long-term impacts of tariffs and border policies. Several op-eds warned that her rhetoric risked deepening divisions by appealing primarily to fear and nostalgia rather than fostering constructive dialogue. The debate also reignited questions about the media's role. Leavitt's pointed accusations that mainstream outlets twisted facts to fit narratives struck a chord with many disillusioned viewers. This skepticism towards elite media and Washington insiders was a recurring theme, amplified by social media platforms where alternative voices often drowned out traditional reporting. Sarah Mitchell, the debate's moderator, reflected on the event in a post-show interview. "Tonight's clash was more than a policy discussion. It was a window into America's fractured political landscape. What stood out was the passion and urgency on both sides. It's a reminder that in 2025, voters aren't just looking for policies, they want authenticity, trust, and hope." Political commentators began to frame the debate as a defining moment in the 2024 election cycle, a symbolic battle between the old guard and a new wave of outspoken, media-savvy politicians who speak directly to voters' everyday realities. Karoline Leavitt emerged not just as a defender of Trump's legacy, but as a potential leader of a movement driven by cultural pride and economic nationalism. Senator Schiff, though bruised by the encounter, remained resolute. In a brief statement, he acknowledged the need for Democrats to better communicate their message and emphasized his commitment to working for all Americans. This debate showed us the work ahead, bridging divides, listening deeply, and presenting clear solutions for the challenges we face together. As political pundits debated who won and what it meant, one fact was undeniable. The debate spotlighted the deep polarization gripping the nation. For millions of Americans, the arguments heard in that studio echoed their own frustrations, hopes, and fears. Karoline Leavitt's rise was no accident. It reflected a broader shift in American politics, one where charisma, connection, and clear, relatable narratives often trump traditional policy discourse. Whether this new style could translate into lasting political power remained to be seen, but for now, Leavitt had captured the moment and the country's attention. The nation now faced a pivotal choice. Would voters embrace a future shaped by bold, sometimes divisive voices promising immediate results? Or would they seek cautious, inclusive leadership aimed at gradual change? The answer would unfold in the months ahead. But one thing was certain, political debates like this were no longer just about words. They were battles for America's very identity. The echoes of that charged debate between Karoline Leavitt and Senator Adam Schiff did not fade quickly. Across the nation, conversations spilled over from living rooms to coffee shops, from online forums to city halls, capturing a country at a crossroads. The political spectacle had become a prism through which the complex divisions of 2025 America were revealed. A nation wrestling with its identity, values, and future direction. Leavitt's meteoric rise from a campaign aide to a symbol of populist, unapologetic conservatism represented more than personal success. It epitomized a broader shift in American politics, one where traditional party structures and messaging were challenged by new voices who wielded social media savvy, direct rhetoric, and an unfiltered connection with disaffected voters. Her performance in the debate had captured the imagination of millions who felt overlooked by Washington's elites and unheard by mainstream media. For these Americans, Leavitt was more than a spokesperson for Trump's policies. She was a champion for their struggles and aspirations. Factory workers in the Rust Belt, farmers in the Midwest, small business owners in the South, and families in suburban neighborhoods found in her words a reflection of their daily realities, economic uncertainty, cultural anxiety, and a longing for stability and security. Yet, this moment also underscored the deep polarization fracturing the country. The intense cheers from Leavitt's supporters were met with equal frustration and fear from those who saw her message as divisive and oversimplified. Senator Schiff, though battered in the debate, represented those Americans still committed to ideals of inclusivity, social justice, and incremental progress. His struggle to break through to an audience tired of political jargon illustrated the challenges facing the Democratic Party as it sought to regain relevance and trust. In the days following the debate, political analysts debated the implications. Some hailed Leavitt's style as the future of effective political communication, direct, emotive, and rooted in personal stories rather than abstract policy discussions. Others warned that such approaches risk deepening social divides and undermining the complexities essential for governing a diverse nation. The media itself was at the center of this storm. Leavitt's repeated accusations that mainstream outlets distorted facts tapped into a wellspring of distrust. Many Americans no longer looked to traditional newspapers or TV networks for information, preferring instead the raw, unfiltered voices they found on platforms like X and YouTube. This fragmentation of the information landscape made consensus and civil discourse more elusive, but also created opportunities for new forms of political engagement and activism. Sarah Mitchell, the moderator of the debate, reflected on the responsibility that came with this evolving role. "We are no longer just conveyors of information," she said in a follow-up interview. "We are facilitators of conversation and understanding in a time when truth itself is contested. It's a challenging but vital role to help bridge divides and foster informed dialogue." For Karoline Leavitt, the debate was a springboard, but it was also a test. The spotlight brought greater scrutiny to her words and actions. Critics questioned the sustainability of her populist rhetoric and the feasibility of the policies she championed. Yet Leavitt showed no sign of retreat. Instead, she doubled down on outreach, traveling the country to meet voters face to face, listening to their concerns, and refining her message. Her visits to towns like Youngstown, Ohio, Des Moines, Iowa, and Phoenix, Arizona revealed a patchwork of American experiences. Hope mingled with hardship, resilience shadowed by frustration. In a town hall meeting in Michigan, a factory worker shared his story. "For years, it felt like we were forgotten, like the government didn't care about jobs or families like ours. Leavitt speaks for us. She fights for us." Such testimonials fueled her momentum, turning supporters into advocates. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party grappled with how to respond. Schiff's defeat was a wake-up call signaling that eloquence and experience alone were insufficient. Party leaders began initiatives to revamp outreach efforts, emphasizing local engagement and authentic communication. Grassroots campaigns focused on addressing immediate community needs, from affordable health care to education reform, aiming to rebuild trust one voter at a time. A younger generation of Democrats, inspired by figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others, pushed for more progressive agendas and innovative outreach using digital platforms. Yet, they too faced the challenge of bridging cultural divides and combating widespread misinformation that often painted their policies in extreme or misleading terms. As the 2024 election season accelerated, the political landscape remained deeply unsettled. Leavitt's performance emboldened Trump loyalists and conservative activists, energizing rallies and fundraising efforts. At the same time, Democrats mobilized their base with a renewed sense of urgency, emphasizing the stakes of what they termed the fight for for America's soul. The nation's media ecosystem also adapted. New formats emerged, blending traditional journalism with interactive community engagement, aiming to provide context and fact-checking while fostering respectful debate. Social media platforms experimented with ways to reduce misinformation and promote diverse viewpoints, though the challenge remained formidable. Beyond the political and media arenas, the debate exposed underlying social dynamics shaping the country. Issues like economic inequality, racial tensions, education controversies, and immigration policy were no longer isolated topics but interconnected threads influencing voter behavior and national discourse. The tension between urban and rural, progressive and conservative, young and old, was palpable and defining. In this environment, political leaders and citizens alike faced profound questions: how to govern effectively in a deeply divided society, how to restore faith in institutions and shared facts, how to balance urgent demands for change with the need for unity and stability. Karoline Leavitt's ascent symbolized one answer embraced by millions: a call for bold, clear leadership that speaks directly to everyday struggles and rejects political correctness as a barrier to truth. Senator Schiff and many Democrats offered another vision, one centered on empathy, inclusivity, and the slow, deliberate work of building consensus and reform. As the nation prepared for the critical votes ahead, the lessons of the debate echoed. Clearly, American democracy was alive, but it was also at a critical juncture. The power of narrative, authenticity, and connection had never been greater, and political survival depended on mastering these elements. The legacy of that debate would be measured not just in headlines or social media shares, but in how Americans voted, how policies evolved, and whether the country could bridge its divides or drift further apart. In the end, the story of Karoline Leavitt and Adam Schiff was more than a political contest. It was a mirror reflecting the hopes, fears, and complexities of a nation still searching for its path forward. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this deep dive into the debate and America's political crossroads insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video where we keep uncovering the stories that shape our world. Take care.